My name is Cormac. I'm 33 years old, and I came to the far interior of Alaska for the most honest reason a man ever had, which was that I no longer believed a single soul would notice whether I existed. I want to say that plainly at the start, because everything that happened to me out there turns on it. I did not come north to find myself. I came north to lose myself, to go somewhere so empty and so far past the end of the last road that I could set my life down like a coat I was tired of wearing and walk away from it, and no one would come looking, because I had become fairly sure by then that no one anywhere would. I had spent my 20s becoming a pilot the careful, expensive way, building hours in flight schools and freight runs and right seats, until I climbed into a real job flying for a growing regional carrier called Pacific Cascade, in a world of jet bridges and dispatchers, and a crew scheduler who moved us around the country like checkers. I was good at it. I want you to know that, not out of pride, but because it matters that I did nothing wrong. I flew clean. I passed every check ride. I was on track for the left seat and the whole tidy life they dangle. And then, in the space of one bad year, I learned what I actually was to all of it. Pacific Cascade got swallowed in a merger by a bigger airline, the way small carriers do, and a company I had never worked for a day printed a list of positions eliminated, and my seat was on it. Not my performance, my seat. A seniority number in a spreadsheet, redundant the moment two route maps overlapped. A man I had never met read the news to a room of us off a laminated card, thanked us for our service, and reminded us to return our badges and manuals at the desk on the way out. 4 years of my life closed out like a hotel folio. I stood in the parking lot afterward understanding, for the first time in a bone-deep way, that I had been a part, not a person, a part they had a warehouse full of. You do not grieve a part. You order another and throw the old one away. I could have carried that. Men lose jobs. But the same year, and I will not pretend the two were not tangled, the woman I was going to marry decided the same thing about me that the airline had, only she said it kinder, which was somehow worse. Her name was Dana. We had been together 6 years, and when the job went and the moving and the uncertainty came, she found she could picture the rest of her life just fine without me in it. She was not cruel. That is the part that hollowed me out. She was gentle and reasonable and already half gone. And inside of 5 months, she had a different life and a different man in the house we had picked out together. And it closed over the space where I had been without a ripple. I had been to the two biggest things in my life, a placeholder. Easily eliminated. Easily replaced. Forgettable. A man you swap out and do not think about again. So I did the thing a certain kind of gutted man does. I looked at a map for the emptiest place on it that still needed pilots, and I found the far interior of Alaska, and I took a job flying mail and freight and medevac out of a scraped gravel hub called Bell Fork to a scatter of villages the roads have never reached and never will. I did not take it to heal. I took it because it was the farthest I could get from every room where I had been made to feel disposable, and because a country that big and cold does not pretend to need you, or even to see you. That was exactly what I wanted. A place to be no one, until whatever was left of me quietly ran out. But that came later. First, I have to tell you about a village called Nulek, and about a nurse, and about an old man and a folded piece of paper, because those are the things that found me out there and refused to let me disappear. I flew out of Bell Fork through the back half of that first summer and into the freeze-up. In summer, I put the plane on tundra tires and set down on river bars. In winter, I put her on skis and landed on frozen sloughs and strips the villages stamp flat with snow machines so the mail and the medicine can come in. Between the villages, there is nothing a person from the outside would call anything. No towns, no lights, mountains with no names on the common charts, rivers that freeze and break up and drown people who do not respect them, black spruce standing in muskeg for 100 miles in every direction. It is a country that does not care whether you live, and I had gone looking for exactly that, because at the time I did not much care either. I kept to myself the way I had planned to. I took the runs nobody wanted, the far beat, the early starts, the marginal days. I did not learn people's names if I could help it. I unloaded the mail and got back in the plane and flew home to a rented room in Bell Fork with a cot and a hot plate. And I told myself a man could live a long time as a delivery mechanism, an engine, and a set of hands that showed up and went away. Dutch, the old mechanic who ran the Bell Fork hangar, a wide gray slab of a man who had wrenched on bush planes since before I was born, watched me do this for 2 months and then told me, without looking up from the cowling, that I flew like a man mailing himself somewhere and hoping he got lost in transit. I did not answer him. He was not wrong, and I did not yet want to be known well enough for anyone to be right about me. The farthest village on my beat was Nulek. It sits on a long bend of the Kessock River, a couple hundred people, a school, a store, a scatter of houses up on pilings against the flood and the frost, and a little clinic with a red cross painted on a plywood sign that the wind has half stripped. I flew there twice a week when the weather allowed, hauling mail and freight, and now and then, hauling someone out who needed a doctor the clinic could not be. It was the run that paid the least in the coin I was counting, which was silence, because Nulek would not leave a man silent, and I learned that slowly, against my will. The clinic was run by a nurse named Naomi. She was maybe 29 when I met her, though she carried herself older, the way a person does who is the only trained medical anything for 60 miles and knows it. She was the whole of Nulek's health care, the clinic and the house calls and the deliveries and the deaths, a young woman with a steady voice and tired eyes, and a way of moving through an emergency like the emergency was the calm part of her day. She had trained in the city and come back to the country she was from on purpose, because, as she told me later, a place is only as strong as the people who refuse to leave it. She met every plane I brought in, because half of what came off it was hers, the vaccines and the insulin and the oxygen, and the first dozen times we spoke it was strictly cargo, her checking a manifest against a clipboard while I stood there wanting to be gone. She saw through me faster than I liked. She had a clinician's eye, and she turned it on me the same way she turned it on a patient, quick and level and not fooled. Maybe the third week of the freeze-up, a raw day with the river running slush, I came in late and cold to the bone off a run where I had let the plane sit out in a squall longer than I should have, and she took the manifest from my hands and looked at me over it and said, "You know, we count on this plane." She said it plainly, not as thanks, more as information, the way she might tell you your blood pressure was high. I muttered something about the schedule and left, but it sat in me on the flight home, because in a year of being erased by everything I had touched, it was the first time anyone had said out loud that my showing up was something they were leaning their weight on. I did not want it to matter. It mattered anyway. There were people in that village who would not let a man stay a stranger, and the worst of them, in the best way, was a little girl named Pia. She was 6. She belonged to the family that ran the store, and she was wild for aircraft the way some children are wild for horses. She knew the sound of my engine before it cleared the far bend of the river, and she was standing at the edge of the strip in the cold every time I came in, hood down so she could hear better, waving both arms over her head like she was bringing me in herself. The first few runs I nodded and kept working. She was undeterred. By the fourth or fifth, she had appointed herself my ground crew, walking my wingtip while I taxied, solemn as a flag officer, telling me things about my own plane I did not know, that the left ski threw more snow than the right, that I came in higher on the cold days. And one run in October, she ran up before I could shut the door and handed me a piece of paper, folded into a fat lumpy square the way small children fold, and told me it was for my window so the plane would not be lonely, and ran off before I could say anything at all. It was a crayon drawing of my plane, red and lopsided, with a yellow sun and a stick pilot in the window, and a row of tiny stick people underneath with their arms up, waving, and over the top of it, in the careful crooked letters of a child who has just learned them, she had written the plane's tail number, which she had read off the fuselage 100 times waiting for me. I sat in the cockpit and looked at that drawing for a long time. Then I did a thing I did not plan and could not explain to myself. I taped it to the panel where I would see it, and I flew home to Bell Fork with a 6-year-old's crayon plane in my cockpit, and I did not take it down. It is still there. It turned out to be the first mark in a map I did not know was being drawn. The old people started in on me too. There was an elder in Nulek named Martin, well up in his 80s, who had lived his whole life on the Kesuck and watched pilots come and go across 60 winters, and he took an interest in me I could not shake and did not understand. He would stand near the plane while I loaded, watching my hands and the sky, and one day in early November he asked me, out of nothing, how I found Nulek in flat light. I told him the truth, that I flew the river and the government charts in my own memory, and that in a whiteout I flew the compass and the clock and hoped. He shook his head slowly, the way an old man does at a young man's foolishness, and said the charts did not know this country, that a map made by men who had flown over the Kesuck twice at 10,000 feet was a stranger's guess, and that a man flying it in the dark deserved better. And then he went home, and I thought that was the end of it. It was not the end of it. It was the beginning of the thing I most want to tell you about. 2 runs later, Martin was waiting at the strip with 3 other elders who had spent their lives reading that river, and he had a piece of paper. Not a child's paper this time. A big sheet of butcher paper from the store, and on it, in pencil and ballpoint and the sure hands of people who had walked and boated and mushed every foot of that country, they had drawn me a map. My map. A hand-drawn chart of the Kesuck drainage the way the village knew it and no government ever would. The gravel bars that stayed firm into July and the ones that turned to soup after breakup. The slough that held open water latest in the fall. The pass that funneled the wind into a rotor that would slap a small plane out of the sky. The willow flat where the moose crossed so I would know where not to be low at dusk. The safe benches and the killing ones. The good ice and the rotten. All they had put their whole country into my hands so that I would come home. I did not have the words. I stood there holding it while the 4 of them watched me, and Martin said, "We have seen a great many pilots and most of them fly over us. You land. You come back. A man who comes back should not have to guess at our river." And that was all. They did not make a ceremony of it. They handed me the country and went back up the bank to get out of the cold, and I stood on the strip at Nulek with the whole of a place written down in my hands, and something moved in my chest that I had been certain was dead. Because you do not spend an evening of your old age putting your killing ground and your safe ground on paper for a man you consider replaceable. You do it for a man you have decided you cannot afford to lose. They had decided that about me before I had let myself want it, and I taped their map to the panel of my plane next to Pia's crayon drawing, and I started to fly by it, and I have flown by it ever since. The winter came on the way it does up there, all at once and then forever. The river locked up. The light shrank to a few gray hours, and then to almost nothing, the sun rolling along the ridgeline at noon and giving up. And in that dark, without deciding to, without ever once admitting I was doing it, I stopped being a delivery mechanism and started becoming part of the place. I lingered when the weather let me. I started staying over in the little room off the clinic, the village kept for the pilot and the visiting doctor. I fixed things because that is how a man like me says what he cannot say. The clinic's dying generator, the school's broken snow machine. Pia added things to my window, a second drawing, a strip of red yarn tied to the yoke for luck. The elders added to the map, a mark here, a warning there, each run a little more of the country appearing in Martin's hand. And Naomi kept a mug for me at the clinic and started asking, in the careful way of a person feeling for the edges of another, why a pilot with my training was flying the far beat alone out of a cot and a hot plate, and I found I did not answer, but I also found I did not leave. I have to tell you about a flight in December, the day the ice around me cracked all the way through, and I found out I had become something to that village I could not walk away from. There was a boy in Nulek named Cody, 12 years old, the storekeeper's son and Pia's cousin, and one December afternoon he came into the clinic doubled over, and by evening Naomi knew it was his appendix and knew it had burst. She got on the radio to me at Bell Fork, her voice steady but with a wire under it, and said she had a boy going septic and no way to treat what was loose in his belly, that he had hours, not days, and that the weather was marginal, low cloud and a front sliding in, a window closing but not yet closed. And here is the thing I understood in the 4 seconds after she stopped talking. There was no one else. No other plane, no other pilot, no warehouse of parts to pull a replacement from, just me and my plane and Martin's map, and a boy who would die in a plywood clinic if I decided the weather was too much. In my whole life, in the airline and everywhere before it, I had never once been the only one. There had always been another pilot, another seat, another me. Out here I was the difference between a child living and dying, and the weight of that did not crush me the way I would have guessed. It set me on fire. I flew to Nulek under a lowering ceiling, following the river by the elder's map. The bad passes marked in Martin's hand, so I knew which valleys would try to kill me. I loaded Cody on a litter and Naomi climbed in to keep him alive, and Pia stood at the edge of the strip with her whole family, not waving this time, just watching, her small face turned up at me with a trust so total it frightened me more than the weather. I flew that window with everything I had and made the city, and an ambulance took him and ran. Cody lived. He came home in January on my plane, thin and cranky and pulling Pia's hair, and the whole village treated it like weather, like something that simply happens. A pilot came when he was called. But I did not treat it like weather. I had spent a year believing I was a thing the world could misplace without noticing, and a village on a frozen river had just bet a child's life on my being there, and the boy was alive because of it. And I could not get that to fit inside the small dead idea of myself I had carried north. That night back in Nulek, waiting out the dark before I flew home empty, I sat with Naomi on the step of the clinic under a sky that had cleared to a hard, cold black, and the aurora came out, great slow curtains of green and rose folding across the whole dome of the sky, silent, older than anything, and we watched it a while without talking. And then she asked me again, not looking at me, the question she had been circling for weeks. Why a pilot like me was out here alone, flying the far beat off a cot, so plainly running from something. And I found under that sky, with a boy alive in a city because I had come, that I could tell her. So I did. I told her about Pacific Cascade, and the laminated card, and the badge I turned in at the desk. I told her about Dana, and the warm lit house that closed over the space where I had been without a ripple. I told her the thing I had never said to anyone, which was that I had come to believe I was a placeholder, easily eliminated and easily replaced, and in the end, forgettable, and that I had flown 2,000 miles north to a country that would not miss me, because being unmissed on purpose hurt a little less than being unmissed by accident. She listened the way she listened to everything, completely, without flinching and without reaching to fix it. And when I was done, she was quiet a while, and then she said the thing I have carried ever since. She said, "You have it exactly backward. Down there you were one of 1,000 pilots, and a company could lose you in a spreadsheet, and a woman could replace you in 5 months, and I am sorry, because that is a real wound." But then she turned and looked at me. She said, "Out here there is no other pilot. When Cody was dying tonight, there was one plane in the sky that could come, and if you had decided you were too gutted or too sure of your own smallness to climb in, that boy would be dead right now, and there would have been no one to order in your place." She said, "The elders do not draw their killing ground on paper for a man they can lose. Pia does not stand in the cold for a plane. She does not need to come home. I do not keep a mug for a part. You came to the one country on earth where you are the opposite of replaceable, and you have been too busy grieving the old life to notice that this one cannot spare you." And then she said quietly, the thing that finished it. She said, "We would feel it in our bones if you did not come back, Cormac. Do not tell me you are forgettable. I have watched a whole village learn the sound of your engine." I did not have anything to say to that. It went too deep to answer. I flew home in the dark with the aurora burning over the wing and the elder's map taped to my panel, and I understood that I had been seen more clearly than anyone had bothered to see me in years, and that I did not want to disappear anymore, and that this frightened me more than any storm ever had, because to stop wanting to disappear is to admit you have something to lose. Winter went on. I will not pretend it turned all at once, because it did not. I still flew too hard on the bad days, and still slept some nights on the cot in Bell Fork telling myself I was only passing through. But the shape of my life had changed under me while I was not watching. Naomi and I talked on the clear nights, the way people talk who are deciding something they have not admitted they are deciding. Two people so long in the habit of carrying their whole lives alone that leaning on someone felt like a kind of falling. The elders kept adding to the map. Pia kept adding to my window. Martin started calling me by a word in his own language that he would not translate for a long time, and when he finally did, one night by the stove, he told me it meant the one who comes. I was, though I would not have used the word, being knit into a place, thread by thread, by people who had simply decided I was theirs and gone on treating me that way until it was true. And then came the night the country asked me for everything. It was late February, the dead heart of the winter, and a storm was coming that everyone had been watching for 2 days. A big one, a real interior blow with wind behind it, the kind of system that shuts the whole country down and that no one flies. I was at Bell Fork with the plane in the hangar and the forecast on the wall when the radio came alive with Naomi's voice, and I knew before she said a word, the way you know, that this was the one. It was Martin. The old man who had drawn me the country had collapsed that afternoon, and Naomi, who could read a body the way he could read a river, said it was a bleed somewhere deep in his gut, that he was going gray and cold and dropping into shock, that the clinic had nothing that could hold him, that he had hours and maybe not that. She said the words as steady as she could, and then her voice went to a place I had never heard it go, and she said, "Cormac, I know exactly what I am asking. There is no one else, and no window is going to open in time, and if you do not come, the man who drew you your map is going to die in the village he mapped. I need you to fly." And the storm was already on us. Not coming on us. The wind at Bell Fork was tearing the snow sideways across the strip. The ceiling was on the deck. The whole interior had gone to a screaming white nothing, and every rule in every book I had ever flown by, every minimum, every careful, reasonable thing the old life had drilled into me, said the same word. Scrub. Wait for a window. A dead pilot saves no one. Dutch stood in the hangar door and looked at the sky and looked at me and said, "Real quiet. Nobody flies in this, Cormac. Nobody." And here is what I understood, standing there with Naomi's voice in my ear and Martin's map taped to my panel, and the worst storm in years pulling the sky down onto the whole country. A year ago, the man I had been would have scrubbed it. Not from cowardice, but from the settled certainty that he did not matter, that he was one small thing in a world well stocked with other pilots. Except there was no other pilot. There was one plane that could reach Martin, and I was the only hands in the world that could fly it there, and the whole meaning of that had flipped inside me over one winter. I was not disposable here. I was the difference between an old man living and dying, and I was not going to let the man who had drawn me my country die waiting for a window, while I stood safe in a hangar being replaceable. Not tonight. Not ever again. I did not wait for the window. I told Dutch to pull the plane out. He looked at me for one long second, and then he did it, because some part of him had been waiting all winter to see whether I would turn out to be a pilot or a ghost. I proflighted her in the screaming dark with a headlamp and numb hands, stripped every ounce of weight I did not need and put extra fuel on, and I looked one time at Martin's map and Pia's crayon plane and the red yarn on the yoke, the whole village written into my cockpit, and I flew into the storm. I am not going to tell you it was brave, because that is not what it was. It was the hardest flying of my life, and I do not entirely know how I lived through it. I flew low, under the worst of it, down in the river valleys where the wind was a little broken by the country, and I flew by the elder's map, by Martin's own hand, the passes he had marked as killers looming up out of the dark, exactly where he said they would be, so I knew to keep to the far side. The village guiding me through its own country in the handwriting of the man I was flying to save. The plane bucked and dropped, and the snow came at the windshield like static. No horizon, no lights, nothing but the compass and the clock and the altimeter, and a hand-drawn map made by people who had decided I was worth keeping. There were minutes over the Kessock when the plane fell out from under me in a downdraft, and the black spruce came up closer than I want to remember. And in those minutes, I found out something true about myself that I had been hiding from for a year. I wanted to live. I had come north half hoping to quietly run out, and out there with an old man's life on the far end. I wanted to live more than I had ever wanted anything, because for the first time since the parking lot and the laminated card, my life was not a spare part. It was the only one that would do. I made Nulek. I came out of the murk over the bend of the river reading Martin's map, and there were the strip lights, every truck and snow machine in the village lined up along the packed snow with their headlights on to show me the way down, the whole of Nulek out in the storm holding a lane of light open for me. It was the worst weather any of them had ever seen, and instead of shuttering their houses, they had driven every machine they owned out into it and pointed their lights down the strip and stood in the wind waiting for one man's plane, because they could not spare me, and they had decided to say so with the only thing they had, which was light. I put her down in a crosswind that should have wrecked us and did not, and taxied up to the clinic with my hands shaking, and Naomi was already running out through the blowing snow. And then the run back, which was worse, because now there were 3 of us and a life in the balance. We loaded Martin on a litter, and Naomi climbed in to keep him in the world. And I flew that old man who had drawn me the country back out through the storm he had mapped, guided the whole way by his own hand on the paper in front of me. It was the most frightened I have ever been and the most awake, and those turned out to be the same thing. We made the city. The lights came up out of the storm, and the runway was the most beautiful thing I have ever seen, and a team took Martin and ran, and Naomi stood on the ramp in the blowing snow and finally came apart, and I held her while she did, because there was no one else to and because I did not want there to be. Martin lived. It was a bleeding ulcer, deep and bad, and the surgeon said later that another hour would have been an hour too many. If I had waited for the window, there would have been no old man to fly. He spent 3 weeks in the hospital and came home to Nulek in March on my plane, gray and slow and grinning, and the whole village came down to the strip to meet him. And when they had helped him up the bank, he stopped and turned and looked at me for a long moment. He did not thank me. He did a thing that meant more. He reached into his coat and took out the map, the original, the big butcher paper sheet that lived on my panel and that I had handed him at the hospital without remembering doing it. And he had added to it, in the shaky hand of a man 3 weeks out of surgery, a small careful drawing of a house on pilings by the river, right in the middle of the country, and under it, a single word in his own language. And this time he told me what it meant without my asking. It meant home. He handed it back and said, "You kept flying by our country. It is time our country had you in it." And he went up the bank to his family, and I stood there holding a map with a home drawn on it, and I understood that I had been given something I had stopped believing existed. I stayed. That is the part I most want to tell you, because for a long time I could only imagine the other ending, the one where the gutted man flies off alone into the empty country and calls his disappearing a kind of dignity. I did not fly off. I moved to Nulek that spring, gave up the cot in Bell Fork and took a house on pilings by the river, the very house it turned out that Martin had drawn on the map, and I flew the mail and the medevac out of the village itself instead of the hub, close to the strip, close to the clinic, close to the nurse and the child and the elders who had refused to let me vanish. The company grumbled and then agreed, because a village would rather have a pilot who lives among them than one who flies in from a town, and because I think Dutch told them something about the way I had flown into that February storm. Naomi and I did not rush. We were not people who rushed, both of us so long in the habit of carrying our whole lives ourselves that leaning was a skill we had to learn slowly, an inch at a time, the way you learn to trust weather again after it has hurt you. But it grew the way the strongest things grow, underground first and all at once later. We married the following summer, on the riverbank at Nulek under a sky that stayed light almost all night, the whole village there, Martin strong enough by then to stand up beside me, Pia carrying a fistful of fireweed and correcting everyone's job the entire time. There came a moment on the bank when Naomi looked up at me with the long gold light on the river behind her, and I stopped being the man who was only passing through, and I kissed her, once quietly, with the whole village pretending not to watch, and it was the first thing in 2 years that felt less like surviving and more like living. That is as much as I will tell you. It was a kiss, and it was quiet, and it was everything. I fly the same country now that I once flew alone. The mail and the medevac, the villages the roads never reach, the storms and the flat light and the black spruce standing for 100 miles. But I do not fly it to disappear anymore, and I do not fly it as a part that any warehouse could replace, because a village on a frozen river taught me, over one winter, that a man is not a thing you order out of a catalog, that showing up in the dark for people counting on you is the opposite of being forgettable, and that belonging is not something you are handed at birth and lose in a merger. It is something a place decides about you and then draws on a map so you can. I have had nights the weather one, when I stood on the strip and could not fly and someone did not make it, because that is the true cost of that country, and I will not pretend it away. But I fly those nights as a man who knows he is needed, which is a different thing entirely from the man who came north sure that he was not. I have thought a great deal in the years since about the man I was in that parking lot, holding a badge I had just been asked to give back, certain all the way down that I was a placeholder the world would fill without noticing I was gone. He believed the worst lie there is, which is that a person can be replaced, that because a company could lose him in a spreadsheet and a woman could close over the space where he had been, he was therefore small and forgettable and better off vanishing into a country too big to care. He had it exactly backward, and it took a child's crayon plane and 4 old people with a sheet of butcher paper, and a nurse on a clinic step under the northern lights, and one impossible storm to turn him around. They did not save me by telling me I was special. They saved me by needing me, plainly and without apology, by betting a child's life and an old man's life on my showing up, by standing out in a killing storm to hold a lane of light open so I could come home. You are not disposable in a place that would feel it in its bones if you did not come back. I flew 2,000 miles to a country I chose because it would not miss me, and it looked at me and decided it could not spare me, and it drew me a map with a home in the middle of it, and it taught me the only thing I know now for certain, which is that no one who is truly needed by even one other soul is a part that can be swapped out and forgot. Martin still adds to the map. Pia is 12 now, and still tells me my left ski throws more snow. Naomi keeps a light on in the house on pilings. And I fly into the weather when the weather has a life on the far side of it, and I come home, every time I can, to a village that would know in its bones if I did not. Would you have flown into the storm for people who had every reason to forget you?